Welcome to the Yoga Therapy Hour podcast with Amy Wheeler. We're a global community of yoga therapists and related professionals who are sharing our knowledge and experience with one another to make the world a better place for all of us to thrive. On this podcast, we have deep and thought-provoking conversations that we hope will nourish you and make you feel more connected to yourself and to others. Feel free to continue these conversations on our private Facebook group called Yoga Therapy Hour Podcast with Amy Wheeler, and listen at the end of the podcast each week as we'll be giving away a special gift. Remember, we have a mobile app coming out May 2nd, 2022 that tracks mental health and so much more using the foundations of yoga and Ayurveda. Hello. This morning, I'm speaking with Helene Couvrette, and she is the co-founder of MISTY, which is basically the Canadian version of Sitar. It's a little bit smaller, but it's a wonderful yoga therapy conference that she puts on every year. It's been a little bit delayed because of COVID the last 2 years, but she'll tell us about that. She also has a yoga therapy school that kind of focuses on small groups, which I find really wonderful because Optimal State Yoga Therapy School is also having more small groups, a lot more personal interaction, really, really deep relationship over several years, and transformation of the human spirit during that time. So I feel like Helene and I have parallel lives in that respect. And she believes and talks all day today on the podcast about the trauma she's experienced in her life, the suffering, the really, really hard times, and the ability for the phoenix to rise out of the ashes. That there's a time and a place for processing and digesting and grieving and being with our deepest loss. And then there's a time to make a decision that life will continue to move forward and that we can integrate that grief and loss and trauma into our current way of being in the world. That it actually becomes a part of us and informs us moving forward into our lives, making us a more authentic, compassionate, kind human being. And then in the process, we can learn to do that for others, right? It's very, very hard to help someone else find their authentic self and tap into that deep empathy and compassion and learn how to rise up out of very difficult times. It's very hard to do that for someone else or help them do it if you haven't been through that experience. And, every year we start a new cohort in May with our business course at the Optimal State. And I think people come into the business course thinking that, oh, this is all about figuring out how to run social media. And this is all about my why. And they have a very different idea of what the business course is. And what it boils down to is what Helene and I talk about today, that getting to know yourself, getting to be with yourself, becoming authentic and finding what your special gifts are and your special powers are. That's really the thing that we do in the business course, in addition to social media and, marketing and all that great stuff and, which camera to use. Of course, all that's going to be there. But the place people get stuck, whether they're in our longer term yoga therapy program or they've just decided to take the business course, is who am I? What are the gifts that I bring? What makes me shine? What can I bring to the world that's very special that only I can bring? That's where the work is. And we had to increase the business class from 6 months to 11 months because it takes time to go inside and find that and be with that. And I laugh because someone recently told me who just took the business course, she said, this was a much deeper transformative experience than my actual yoga therapy training. And I thought, isn't that interesting? And I think it's because where the rubber hits the road, which is I have to provide for myself, I have to make a living, I have bills to pay, that we cannot spiritually bypass. We can't just kind of jump over it and be like, oh, I'm fine. No, finding your true authentic self and learning how to allow yourself to shine and take ownership for who you are, that is not easy work. And that is something you can't spiritually bypass over. So when I was speaking with Helene about all of this today, it really just made me aware of how difficult it is for people to own their power, to know what they're good at, to allow themselves to shine and be 100% authentic. And that's what this episode today is all about. And I think it's a really sweet, deep episode that will make you think and make you question and make you wonder, wow, am I doing that? I call myself a yoga therapist, but am I doing what Amy and Helene discussed today? Do I need a brush up? Do I need someone to support me so that I can start that journey? So I hope it inspires you. I know it did me. And here we go. Welcome to Helene Couvrette. Thank you for coming today, Helene. Nice to see you.
Hi. Yes, I am Helene Couvrette. I know that's hard for the
Couvrette.
It's a French.
I've been saying your name wrong for years.
It's a French name, Couvrette, coming from Quebec. So yeah, and Helene is also tough for people. I used to spell it E-E-N to help people, but I've gone back now to my E-N-E because just going to help people find out how to say my name. I'm happy to see you, Amy. Thanks for having me on the show.
I am too. I'm happy. It feels like we get to have tea together this morning. And, you know, for those of you who don't know, Helene is the founder of the MISTY Yoga Therapy Conference in Canada. It's kind of like the sitar of Canada. And Helene invited me a few years ago and hosted me and many others. And it was just such a wonderful conference. So we're going to talk about that at the end of the show and learn more about if we're having it this year and how we might be able to participate. But the topic of the day that Helene has chosen is how to create relationships, how to get rapport, how to get trust, how to help people feel heard and seen and safe. Big one, safe. So, Helene, where would you like to start this morning with all of this? And it could even be your own story and your journey of healing. I'm going to leave it open to you.
When there's so much to say, it's so hard to figure out where to start. But as I thought about sitting with you and chatting over tea about what I'm passionate about, and just what came to me was that authenticity that I strive to live by. As you know, having been at my conference, MISTY, which was co-founded, actually. I just want to give honor to the partner that I was with at the time that I co-founded with, but it is mine now. He graciously bowed out and went on with his life. But yeah, I think that what a big part of MISTY, a big part of the conference, a big part of the students I have in my teacher training, which are always really small groups, less than 10 usually, in one-on-one yoga therapy, and even in my Zoom classes. And then when I had the physical space of my yoga center, which is now all online, is that ability to be authentic and real and how people respond to that. And I guess my point of talking about it today was how deeply I feel and have had so many, especially the one-on-one clients, because there's where they share personal experience, and there's where you get to know how much it made a difference, the warmth, the openness that you have as a person, and how that assisted them into their healing process, because for the nervous system to be in a safety place, it has to have a sense of trust. And so if you're in front of someone, especially if they're going to make you move and might help you out with props and be at that close vicinity with you, or even for many, just being alone in a room with somebody, if you don't have that feeling of safety, your nervous system is not going to be as nicely placed as we'd like it. We want them to be in a place to receive the poses, to receive an invitation to practice a breath practice, to receive maybe a guided meditation to help them. And they have to feel comfortable with you for that. It's such a personal work one-on-one. But even in a group setting, I've over the years had so many people after or before class, express or in emails, someone even mailed in with a stamp kind of mail, a thank you and gratitude for even the online continuum. And just it's always expressed whatever happened in their life that helped, that transformed, that gave them comfort had a lot to do with, they'll say, with, the way you were, Helene. And I'm always saying, I'm just sharing yoga tools, right? Yoga tools that are doing it, because I believe in being a humble yogi, but I want them to continue yoga, even if it isn't with me, as I often say. So yes, the yoga tools help, but also that person. And it doesn't mean that I'm better than anyone. It just means, because I believe that people will find you, the right people will find you in a class or in one-on-ones or in the teacher training. I have a new group, a lovely group. I interview them and I let them know that this is important, because we're going to spend 3 years together. And so how deeply I believe that assists in helping an individual open up to receive the gift of what yoga tools can offer them.
So I completely agree. I mean, relationship is where it's at. And I had interviewed an Indian teacher a few weeks ago, and Gita also said friendliness, kindness, openness, trust, authenticity. That's a huge part of the healing. And the latest research is saying up to 60%, right? So we know this is maybe the most important yoga tool, especially because it's impacting on that Vijnana Maya layer of the Panchamaya model, that personality, communication, perception, life experience. So I want to back up and say, how did you get comfortable in your skin to be able to show up this way? Because that's really the question. There's a lot of people out there that want to create a safe space. They want their nervous system to give off, a safe vibe for neuroception, but they're not even comfortable with themselves. So it's a very difficult thing to create a safe co-regulation when they're not even safe within themselves. So how did you get there, Helene?
That's an excellent question, because I've been, as I start a new cohort and finishing an old one, not an old one, but the last one, we're sort of having a little crossover. I get a lot of times, as I videotape myself with permission, of course, with some people that I do privates with as a tool to help for yoga therapy training. And they'll say, like, I can't do that, Helene. I can't be like that. And I keep saying to them, but I believe you are a kind, compassionate human being. That's why you showed up and committed to the years and hours and work it takes through this training to be from a yoga teacher to a yoga therapist. So it's in you, but it's just your version. But yes, and I shout out to Shelley Brasco. We were in California one time having supper with a group of people. I'm trying to remember who was there. Baxter and Shelley and a few others joined us. And then it was one of these funky California restaurants. And they said, today we have a question. What makes you lovable? Or what makes you something like that? Like, what's your power? What's that word they say? What's your superpower? And Shelley did one of her wow checks. And I said, I think this is what I have that's natural. And I'll get to this answer. But as I want to be humble, so it's hard to say. I believe my superpower is I can be likable, not to everybody, sure that not everybody, and I don't need to be to everybody.
Can I stop you for a minute though?
Sure.
I think naming it and owning it, and of course you're not an arrogant person. You're just not. So I just want to encourage you to stand in your power and say it and not be ashamed. I wish more people would do that. Sadly, it's the arrogant ones that are willing to do it. But the people like you that should be doing it and encouraging their students to do it and being a role model for their students, those are the people we want to actually stand tall and say, yeah, I know how to be likable. I know how to connect with people. That's my superpower. So go for it.
You're a little emotional. And it's kind of like, we had discussed before, and then we sit down for the well check, and I was still apologizing. So and so she said the same thing. And thank you, Amy. That's actually the biggest gift you just gave me, which goes to my point, right? It is indeed this, your soul connecting to my soul deeply. And isn't this really the subject of the day? that namaste, this I honor your soul from the depth of my soul, is really, to me, the root of yoga. Why this symbol? And so, okay, so I feel I'm very likable to most people. And I how did that happen? And I'm going to honor my father, who's gone now. And I think it would be hysterical to sit with him and tell him he was a yogi, because he used to call me bohemian. He loved me to bits, though. That's how I got this way. I think it's that since I was a little girl, we all have our memories, all our samskaras. What sticks with me is my dad saying, as long as you are happy, I am happy. And so in that sentence was everything. I love you no matter what. My only wish is that you find peace and happiness. And he didn't expect anything more from me. And that said, you're great just the way you are. All that was said in that simple, constant saying to me. He might have said it 4 times or 1,000 times, but it stuck in me as something he said so often. And I think that we all get labeled as little roles as kids, and I was likable. I was joyful. I was happy. And I also feel my dad instilled that. He was a man who, I remember getting up to our cottage and saying, Dad, where's the toaster? And he's like, oh, the TV's gone. We had been robbed. And he then said, this is great. Let's go to the cop station, make a report. He has insurance. He's going to get new TV, new toaster. He had this way of seeing things in such a positive way, because I think that's it can be part of being likable, is having that up, happy, presenting yourself to the world as somebody positive is something people tend to respond to. Not everybody. If somebody's in a very depressed state, it's not the place where they want to hear somebody so chipper. It could be annoying. And I've actually had that happen where people say, the problem with you is you're too nice. You're too, and I'm like, okay, that's the problem I'll go to my grave with. I'll take it. Put that on my gravestone. She was too nice.
You are Canadian after all.
I am.
But can I stop you there for a minute? Yeah. I think this is really important. One of my favorite podcasts is The Hidden Brain with Shankar Vedanta. And, he's all about neuroscience. And he had a gentleman on talking this week about stoicism, which sounds like you're just going to shut down and repress your emotions. But the researcher from Ohio said, no, it's not shutting down your emotions. It's making a choice to do what your father did, which was, oh my God, we got robbed. And you can either have a complete whoa, that's traumatic. I'm unsafe now. People might come back and hurt us. We lost all our stuff response. Or you can say, we get to go to the police station and file a report. This is going to be fun. And then we get to go buy new things. How great is that? It's stoicism in his view is that ability to do that and just decide I'm going to respond in a way that actually feels better than a way that creates fear and anger and distrust and sadness.
Yeah. And I want to say that I understand, because I've had to let people know this, of course, that it's not easy. I think like everything, the brain gets better at what it practices. This was not just one episode. We had a boat because we were blessed to have a little spot of an island. Well, an island that was a little spot on a lake, only our house on it, not far from mainland. So we had to have a boat. My dad loved anything machine, anything mechanic, anything electronic. And the boat came back from having a repair. So when he turned the key, the engine caught on fire. So he jumped out, undid the ropes, pushed it out. Said, well, it's on water. Nobody's going to get hurt. Get to buy a new boat. I have insurance. And so, there was this constant thing. There was just that. And I don't know that deeply inside, he didn't think, or any other negative thoughts, but he never let us see it. At least that's my perspective. Of course, my siblings may have a different one, but I took that on, and so I think that it's something that we can cultivate, but I have to also say that I understand it's not easy for everyone, because if you have a different past, then it's not so easy,
because it's your neural pathways. They have been programmed since you were in the womb. Yeah. And, I've had some students say, well, I'm hopeless because of my childhood experience. And I actually can't create neural pathways. My amygdala is on fire. It's always in fear and there's no way to do it. And I understand that. And but I do think we can all work on it.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up, because then there's my mom. And I had a kind of flip parenthood, whereas my father was the maternal lovey-dovey, I love you. And my mother was more, more reserved, more unable to access her emotions as easily. And it came from her childhood, being brought up later, born later in her parents' life. And just having, alcoholic parents. And so she buried herself in swimming. She was an Olympic swimmer and is actually in the Hall of Fame as a legend in Calgary. Just before she died, she was called to say, hey, we're going to put you in the Hall of Fame. Anyway, so, and I loved my mother, but she had a struggle with her emotions. So she just did a lot of, coffee and cigarettes and all. It's funny enough, as an Olympic swimmer, but her emotions, she was not able to be close to her emotions. And so sometimes we learn what to do from a parent, but we can also learn, I'd rather not be so much like that. I'd rather cultivate a bit more, because I wished I'd had more warmth from my mother. Not that she didn't love me, but she didn't know how to express it. And so there was also in me, and I actually remember being a child literally choosing how I wanted to be as I grew up, how I wanted to be as a parent. And it was a choice, and it is a choice, not an easy one. Then we have to practice. Just like if you want to have your shoulders, get stretched and be less rounded, you have to work it. It doesn't happen just once. It doesn't happen because you understand that, yes, if I do maybe straighten out, do a few back bends, my back will get a little straighter. It happens if you do the work regularly, consciously, and then things just shift. And this is something I share with clients and students and trainees, that nothing is necessarily so easy. I'm really grateful that it was part of how I grew up and was instilled in me by my parents being the way they were, and by my spirit being able to make that choice at a young age, saying, I don't want to not express. I love the feeling of expressing. I love what I feel when my father expresses love. And maybe that's where it comes from, right? So, and I was, thinking this morning, and it's like the old days, we used to call it bedside manner, how there's doctors we go through, or healthcare professionals, if you've ever been in a hospital, the nurses, your colleagues, anybody in your life, the relationship you have can have such an effect on you. And I truly, honestly believe, even though it's not so natural, I, of course, believe that we all have this light, right? Deep within all those layers of the koshas, we all are good, compassionate beings. It's just the layers of experiences that but that you can get to it. Having said that, I do feel it's one of the hardest things to teach, because it has to come from within. So I guess I can just keep sharing how I feel it's important to keep working at trying to access and cultivate it. And then there's tools to do that in yoga.
Okay. Can we talk about that for a minute? Because first of all, someone could be listening to this saying, you two ladies are completely spiritually bypassing right now. There are systemic and structural things. There's historical things that have really held certain populations back. Mm-hmm. And I just want to make sure that we're not buying into the fact that you just think your way out of it and you're fine and no, that's not it. I think you are very trauma informed. And, even the Indian psychology is saying, like, yes, bad things happen. Yes, trauma happens. Yes, suffering happens to all of us. It's part of the human experience. And you have a choice of what you want to link with in your mind. And so I think one of the big differences between maybe Western psychology and Eastern psychology is, in Western, maybe we stay with the trauma a little bit more, a little bit longer, process it, digest it, talk about it, tell stories about it.
Identify with it.
Identify with it, yes. But truly, and my teachers in India are like, okay, well, we've discussed that a few times. Now, who do you want to be? Are you ready to link with something that's going to shift you into a different place? And actually quite strict about it, not letting me wallow too long. So can you talk about those two things? How long do we stay in the suffering to digest it and recognize it and acknowledge it? And then at what point do we shift and say, you know what? This is not who I am. I'm not going to identify with my suffering forever.
Oh, I can speak to that. So the story that comes to mind is a very deep and personal story, because I totally recognize, so anyone listening, that I'll say it again because I've said it, but I know sometimes the brain needs to hear it. It is work. I am blessed. It's somehow my being made that choice younger. And it's always easier when it's younger to learn anything, right? So often when it's hard, there's an ace up your sleeve that I have. And I mean that in love and compassion to help people understand. I had a stillborn child at 8.5 months, 6.5 pounds baby boy called Brody. And the story is that just before, I have 4 children now. Brody was the 4th to be out of my body. His body was to be out of my body. And just before my second's birthday, I felt a tug as we were all in a family watching TV, some Shrek or something. I went to the bathroom and looking back, I think, oh, that's the moment. What happened with Brody is the cord itself made a knot in itself. And it probably been there for a while, and it probably got tugged, maybe his little sweet little hand, who knows. My doctor described it as being hit by lightning. It is so rare this actually happens. Some babies are born with the cord and all this, but it happened to me. And so again, that's kind of like, I don't mean to bring it up, but that's a suffering that is pretty deep. I birthed a lifeless being. I held him. I buried a child, 6.5 pound boy. But the story, when I went to bed that night, the next day was to be a birthday party for my daughter. And I think I put it away for a while, like this feeling of little pain. And then I felt all day during that party, it's not much movement going on, literally like a dead weight feeling. And I'm comfortable talking about this. I hope I'm not making anybody comfortable, but actually being comfortable is part of the whole grieving process to get to the place where I got to. I went to bed that night after the party, and I had a dream that I went to a hospital that wasn't mine, and the nurses were saying, shouldn't you call your husband? And I was like, no, I'm fine. I just, want to know. It's like, I don't remember the exact of it. Then I woke up the next day after that. So we're at day 2, and I called my doctor, and it's near the end of the day. And I said, look, I'm not feeling really good. He said, just get to the closest hospital. So I actually live out the first dream. I get up the next day and I don't tell my husband, and I go to the hospital, and I'm driving. And that night, this was actually the next day, timeline's a little off, but it was a couple days later. And I had another dream that I was birthing, and it was really sad. So I'm driving to the hospital, and my head, a head thinks lots of thoughts. And it was like, what's the worst I can say? Like, I never had any problem with any pregnancies, love being pregnant, totally Helene, right? Just happy being pregnant, even if I was nauseous and all that stuff. And I thought right away came in, what I had cultivated was like, it's not the end of my story. That was a choice, but it did come from a spirit. It's not going to be the end of my story. I'm not like, so I went there, and of course the ultrasound, and there's no heartbeat. And so I went home, and next day I birthed this child. And the doctor just was very compassionate. And it only been the 3rd baby that he had birthed that was a stillborn. And it was really, and I knew going in it was birthing. So all of this processing, of course I was devastated. I don't always just go, oh, this is great, I'll just have another baby. It's not that way at all. And sometimes that could come across that way when Helene is Helene. But the bottom line is, it's a process. And there was tears, and there was deep pain. Oh my God, deep pain. How could there not be? So I understand, and it doesn't have to be that big a trauma, but I understand that even the smallest things can set us off, and it doesn't have to be that big. But I understand trauma, I understand suffering. And no, I'm not always like this. There are moments of deep grief, and I hold that deep grief. And I allow myself to wallow in it and really cry and feel and do all of that, knowing though that there's going to be a place where, Helene, then it's enough and you move on. Then this is not the end of your story. So I did my grieving. We literally had the whole, I said to Brody, come back when it's time. And my Tessa was born. 5 months later, I got pregnant. And Tessa means fourth. And I believe his fourth soul from me is in her fifth body from me. She knows the story and I'm sticking to it. But that's a choice, that story. It's a made up story in my head, really, but I'm going to hang on to it like a lifeline. And I think that lifeline is my way out. Like, I always try to find a lifeline. One of the things is I believe in a domino effect. You know, people say when bad things happen, there's always a reason. I prefer to see as a domino effect. When I was 22, my 21-year-old brother was hit. He was on a motorcycle and he died. And I learned then that anything can happen to anyone at any time. Again, a choice. And what I held on to, then that means I teach my children and everyone I love, I tell them as many times as I can, I love you. I love you. If I had struggles with my kids, you know, the oldest, we always have a little more struggles with. I'd always say, but we can't end without saying, I love you. This became critical to me. I was the last one to see my brother and tell him I love you. A year after my baby died, my dad died, my hero died. I had just a year before buried my son where his son was buried. Now I'm burying my father where his son and his grandson are buried. But my lifeline was they're all together. So we have to find a lifeline, something that gives a purpose for the suffering. That's my feeling. It's not easy, but it's possible. It's possible, absolutely possible. And that's what the Eastern tradition tells us. And so the choice doesn't mean that it's an easy choice and it's not without first holding space for grieving. There's a need for the grieving. You need to grieve. And I actually think part of the culture is afraid of tears and grieving. I'm sorry, I don't need to cry. Men are not supposed to cry, period. Women should apologize for crying. And I think this is the biggest disservice to humans. I used to say in class and training and privates, I still do, there's a Kleenex box. Never apologize for crying. That's the one thing I won't allow in here, is you cannot apologize. And you know how many times I go, because people will get emotional, as you know, in trainings, some things come up. So let it out, feel it, but know that it doesn't have a time limit because it can come up. Another time I might tell the story and might come emotional and I wouldn't apologize for it. But that then there's a choice of how you're going to live, not after, but with this in your body.
Right. I think it's not like, oh, that's the end of grieving and now we're done and now we're going to go to the happy place. It's like somehow it became integrated as a part of you that's living with you now, informing that, wow, life is short, it's unknown, and I actually want to have some joy before my last breath.
Yeah. And, you know, I had a fleeting thought as you said that that domino effect is this conversation, I'd like to think, is made richer because of these stories. 3 deaths bring depth to this conversation. And that's another lifeline. That's just another, like, okay, you know. And then I go to this other story. I was just telling it last night. When I was a kid, when we had huge storms on this island, the lake was a long lake. And when the rain came and got harder and harder, it was a beautiful thing to watch. And my dad would bring us to the corner windows on each side, and watch it. Then I had a girlfriend who grew up, and her older European parents, her father who had been through the war, he took the toasters and unplugged and you know, I know somebody get away from the windows, whereas my dad brought us to the window. And there's beautiful photography of storms and out there, beautiful. And yet, of course, we also have devastating photography of what storms can leave in their wake. But what I'm always trying to say to try to understand this philosophy of bliss, it's not that you look for happiness, is that it's neither happiness nor sadness. It just is. That storm is beautiful. Or to some, it's something to fear. But it isn't either. It's just a storm. Life is just life. And really, every minute of every day, something's got to happen, and it just can't all be fun and games. But when the hard things happen, I believe they bring depth to our soul. And we can feel deeper, be more compassionate because these things happened. And then we can make a choice to use that, which I think is where that choice, conscious or unconscious, was to be present for others who suffer, to inspire them. So I'm not saying it's easy, but I hope my stories inspire that it's possible, absolutely possible, but it's work.
Yeah. And it may not happen in the first 3 months after a serious loss. Like it can take time. It's allowed to. And maybe one day the new dawn will come, and just leaving that possibility open.
And believing it's possible. It's a similar thing to people who have chronic pain. If you believe you're always going to have this back pain forever, then you will. If you open up to think, maybe I can diminish the pain, maybe it won't completely go away, right? Just like any grief, but I can maybe manage it better with my thoughts, with my breath, with my belief, with my movements, how I move, how I breathe when I move, how I think when I move. That all this affects us, that the way we think, the way we feel, the way we breathe, all this affects, and that it can either turn up the bar of pain, physical or emotional. Like if you just focus on it and believe it's always going to be like this, I'm never, and again, and again, I understand it's not easy in the moment where you're in the deep, but here's the thing, and if I've done this meditation, if you think back to a time when you were 10 and a time you were really sad for a moment, and then think of a time where you were really happy at 10 years old. Those two coexist in your life. Then a time when you were in your 20s and you were miserable and something awful happened, and a time in your 20s when something beautiful happened. Oh my God, you were with your friends and you had this funny, silly times, whatever it was. That we could have these experiences. They are constantly shifting. This is nothing always stays. And so if you fundamentally understand, and this is the teachings as well, that things are constantly evolving and changing, you won't always, there'll be a moment you'll giggle again. Not today, maybe, but at least hang on that there will be. And today cry, today feel the pain. And when you get that first giggle, know that there's that hope. And if you look back and think how many times you were suffering and how many times you were giggling and happy, it's that's life.
Yeah. Back to your chronic pain example, we have many people who come into our yoga therapy training in chronic pain that they found yoga therapy, and some of them actually come in to become trainers, even though they don't believe that there's anything that will help. It's almost like, well, I'll take this program and maybe it will help me find more acceptance. But as your program, over the 3 years, something opens up, one little door opens up, and then another little door opens up. And by the end, they're always saying, wow, I had no idea, not that I'm pain-free, but that there was possibility that I am more joyful, or my connection with my spouse is stronger than it's ever been, or now I know what to do. Like staying in bed all day and taking a hot bath is an option, right? Like those little moments of openness and receptivity lead somewhere over time.
Yeah. And again, it takes time. Just like our nervous system, it can learn quickly, when you think of a lifetime, 80 years, but it also, it takes what yoga offers. It takes conscious, repetitive practice. And that's why yoga, as I always say, it's called a practice. I said, it's called a practice because in the quiet with the candles and the lights and all the safety thing, you practice. And then you go out there in life and that's the game. Now, can you bring it into that? It isn't what you're just doing on the mat. All of this, what we're doing in the mat, meditating, asana, being aware, being conscious, being with breath, philosophy, studying it. It isn't just intended to just learn. It's intended to help you in your life when those things happen, to draw upon them. So I started yoga in my 30s, and it naturally, at first, being my mother's daughter, physical, when my father we water skied and downhill skied, my parents were very athletic. It came to as I wanted to move, but of course, slowly but surely it creeps in, Then I hear an 80-year-old woman say, I went for my yearly checkup. I grew an inch. The doctor said I'm an inch taller. Okay, this helps the physical. Then somebody came to me and said, my blood pressure lowered. Oh, it helps some on a deeper level too now. We're looking at, like that's pretty impressive. And then people started to share, I've been coming and she was quiet for months. And it's the first time I didn't cry in Savasana. I want you to know that my family, my niece had an aneurysm and died. She was 4 years old. And I came here to find some healing. And for the first time, after coming every week, it took a few months, I didn't cry in Savasana. And that's something to celebrate. And then I'm thinking, oh, wow, you know? And then somebody comes to me who's had back pain for 5 years and not really in a happy marriage. And we work together. And I try to help him find he couldn't just exhale. And I just say, go home and keep practicing with yourself. Once he did, then every movement became smoother. And he believed he couldn't forward flex, of course. And then little by little, we went with the breath. And then the next thing he was doing revolved triangle, and had divorced and found a new person and fell in love and everything changed. I'm like, oh, wow, it's everything. And it all just, even in my teaching, I saw it, I was looking for one thing and hearing, and then I was hearing deeper and deeper things. Somebody who's probably going to watch this and will be okay with me sharing, who said, I went away for a while because I started a business because somehow doing this yoga gave me confidence that I never had to start a business. And it's like, you have no idea how you can affect people. And I believe it isn't just the yoga. Going back, I think it's how we present ourselves in our teaching. And it doesn't have to be, in the classes, it's not I'm as friendly as it can be, but it doesn't have the same space as one-on-one does, or even teacher training. But still, I think that energy is felt. And I just think it comes from being authentic, that authentically we are loving beings. And the story we say, I can't be like that, I can't do that, is just an outer layer. The deeper one is absolutely compassionate and loving. We just need to access it more.
And how do you train your yoga therapy trainees that come in with panic attacks and so much insecurity about themselves that, you get someone in year 1, like we both do. Mm-hmm. And by year 3, they're not having panic attacks. They know who they are. They're authentic to themselves. Their whole world has transformed. How do you nurture that process to help them get from those panic attacks all the way to, wow, I am a seasoned yoga therapist and I am ready to go help other people? Because that's amazing, I think.
Yeah. And some of them may say, I'm not 100% that, as the first chord is finishing, but they're closer to it. And that is I think example. My dad showed me by example. And I think it comes from exactly what I'm saying to the trainees, which is why I'm a little not known secret is I'm more an introvert than I am an extrovert, even though my work is with people. And with Misty, I have to shine with all these people, and shining is a word that's often attributed to me. And I love being in there, not because I'm in the spotlight, but because I can shine love and feel love and create this loving environment. You were there. I mean, it's what makes Misty Misty.
100%. There's something really special.
And it's what makes me me, and I'm going to own it. Try to not have any other thing, but I'll own that. I think that I help them see the light within themselves. That no matter what, you don't have to be like me, but where is your shine? And so as I train, this is where you're wonderful. We all need to feel that you are just perfect the way you are. And I was gifted by my dad to feel that. And I think I keep finding, at the same time, being the trainer, giving loving, constructive input. So maybe go in this direction, as opposed to, oh, you shouldn't have done, which is what we should do with children. I have 4 children, right? So it's watching the language and saying, maybe here, this would be more helpful, or this could be helpful, and helping the trainees see how I do that. So when they give comments to each other, it has that tone. And so what's always reinforced is, that was amazing. This is your strength. This is where you got to go. And this could be cultivated. So try to little work on that, but this is still your strength. And then go with that strength, because I believe if maybe your shine is working with nutrition with the person, or using yoga tune-up balls, or whatever it is, that if that's your focus, then go in that direction. So if it becomes something more trauma informed, or people who need more emotional support, they're going to say, I'll refer it to you. Fine. But then if somebody wants to do more kind of, things with, I don't use a lot of props. Like, then I'll say, like, if they're more in that plane, then I'll send them to them. But either way, all the coaches are there and all the elements are there when you're managing a person in pain. So just shine from where you shine. And if it's out of your realm, well, then that's when your boundaries come in. You say, well, I'm going to refer, I think this person, this fellow student, or can probably be better. This is their shine place. So if I can own my shine, there's a lot of places I don't shine, and I can own that too. And then I can refer. But I let them find their shine and own that. And I think then they receive that validation that gives them the confidence. We don't have to be everything.
Right.
So if I'm not good at this, I'm good in that. And you hear for 3 years, oh my God, this is where you're best. I couldn't do that. I could do me, but I can't do that. I can't do you. Just be you. Then, okay, all I have to do is be me. Don't have to be Helene. No, you can be you. And in that, their spirit feels good about themselves. And then when they're present with somebody, that'll come out.
Right.
It's not a tangible thing,
Well, I think it's hidden from them. I think, we all have that inner light, but because of the traumas of life and the anxieties and depressions and all of it, we actually can't see where our gifts are. And I see this all the time in our business course, that people are supposed to tune into what I call their siddhi powers. Instead of superpowers, I call it your siddhi powers. And they can't. They don't know what their special sauce is. They don't know what their siddhi powers are. They get stuck right there. And that's what I'm talking about. Owning your gifts, owning your, hey, here's what I'm really good at. They just can't find it. And so I love what you're saying, that you see it and you point it out and you reinforce it. And you like, hey, other people don't have that. You have that. You really need to own that and grow that. Because I think we can't see it in ourselves. Even this podcast, people are like, wow, Amy, you're at your best in this podcast. I'm like, really? It's just a podcast. But people are like, no, I really like it, And I didn't know that it was one of my gifts to have this conversation,
Yeah. And when our spirit feels, when we start to instill, because so many people I see, no matter whether they come emotionally first or physically, the sense of their self-talk, the way they see themselves, there's a lot of voices of criticism. But physically, I'm not, flexible. I can't do yoga. And I say, you don't have to put your leg behind your head. That's not yoga. That's Cirque du Soleil, Quebec thing, known worldwide. That's not what we're looking for. And then, we're looking to find inner peace and to feel closer to that place where you actually do feel quite secure and peaceful and happy and sure of yourself. That's what we're looking for. So can we just move less and not worry about how flexible we are? So even in the people, who feel that, but there's so much self-criticism, whether it's the physical body or, I think that destroys the spirit. And it comes from layers and experiences of being talked to as a child or as an adult in a relationship or by a boss or a colleague, or that's cultivated. And I help them understand that that's cultivated in you. That's a repetitive voice. But what if you turn that voice around and let's look at what you are good at? Just rock that. So you're not so flexible, but you're showing up. You're showing up because you want to get a little better. That's already 1 point for you. Let's tack that on. You're doing something. You're not sitting around, just you've shown up. I think it's coming from where I am with this best gift that I feel I have. I can see so clearly how few people actually got it, which made me appreciate it so much more. I remember as a kid looking around and my friends not having this sense of self, and it was strange to me. I know now as an adult, it was partly my nature, for sure. Not all children in a family end up the same and with the same parents, but it was maybe the blend, who knows? But it's in me. But then I cultivated it, when my brother died, when my baby died, when my dad died, and then my mom died, and other, those are the bigger things. But there's many I've had a lot of breakups. I have I've had 5 children, but with 3 different men. The stories behind that are not all joyful. So, but each time I kept saying, I have a choice, I have a choice, I have a choice, I have a choice. I literally remember as a young girl having a guy break up with me, going in front of the mirror and saying, I'm not letting this guy, like talking to myself, not letting him make me feel bad about myself. Repeating it even before you believe it. Just keep saying it, it needs repetition, it needs practice. So it wasn't just easy for me. It was a choice that I kept making.
Yeah. And I think it applies to everything in life. I mean, yesterday I was talking to 12 members of a Division I university golf team. And I said to them, guys, it's been 2 terrible seasons with the COVID crisis. Yeah. But are you going to submit yourself and give up your college golf career and just be like, oh, it got ruined? Or are you going to make a decision to go for it and still believe you can win a national championship in spite of all these difficulties? It's really a choice. I said, if you can't make that choice, it's fine. I understand. But for those of you who want to, just decide, I'm going to make the best of this situation. I'm going to look at the positive parts of it. I'm going to go for it. Like it's hard, but it does boil down to you just having hope and deciding, I have support. I have Helene to help me, guide me along the way. I mean, it sounds so simple, but it's really hard.
Yeah. And what you just said is I have support, whether it's me or anybody else, which is exactly why this is the subject, right? We know that without support, isolated human beings suffer more. We need social support, whether it's one person or a few people. And that's exactly my point. That is such, as you said, 60% is. And so why the choice is for me to shine as best I can. Listen, I'm single now, mother of 4. There's a lot of nights I go to bed like, how did I end up single? I've had 5 kids. I'm still alone. What the heck? All my exes are with people. It's hard. It's hard. But I have a choice. I can wallow in it some days. It's okay. I'm going to be sad about it today. I make a choice to be sad about it for today. Tomorrow, I'll shine up again. So it's not that I always am like this. I want to keep repeating that. It's that, and when I have moments where it feels too big, then I'll say, okay, my choice is I'm going to wallow in it for today. Tomorrow, though, that's enough. That choice is not easy, but it is a reality.
And it's daily or hourly.
Hourly, minutely. And that's not a word, but okay. That the fact is it can make the difference, right? We know when I said before, think of a miserable time when you're 10 and a happy, fun time when you were 20, when you're 30s, 40s. And I've done this meditation taking a half an hour. The point is your brain went from here, then it went from there. Then it went from here, then it went from there. You can shift your brain. This is what yoga tells us, right? And so you can see the negative, but you can also then think, oh, I'm going to have some chocolate cake for dessert, right? Your brain can shift. We just have to work at doing that. Just like, I can maybe stretch my shoulders more if I keep doing it. So keep stretching your brain. When you have a negative thought, then, okay, I'm thinking negative. Let's hold space for that. This sucks. COVID sucks. I almost feel guilty to say hold on to, it will be over at some point, So there's no point getting because when I was 10, whatever made me miserable, I don't even remember anymore. Last year, when I banged myself or burnt myself, I'm prone to these things. I don't feel the pain anymore. Eventually, COVID will be in the past. Maybe things will be different, never be the same. Okay. But life is never going to be the same, even without COVID, And thank goodness, because who wants it to be the same all the time? It'd be like Groundhog Day.
I hate that movie. I know so many people that love it, but I just couldn't watch it one more time.
That's so great. And most people, that's like such a well-known.
I know they love it. I'm like, oh no, I'm not watching that. I mean, I understand the philosophy behind it, right? That we keep getting these chances to make a choice, exactly what you're saying, or we can just continue to live in our misery. And it's hard to watch when someone continuously chooses to stay in the suffering. Like that is hard to watch.
Yeah. And I remember somebody I knew who said, but Helene, that's you. I'm not made like you. No, you are. We all are. We all have the layers. We all have a bright light inside. But her upbringing wasn't a good start at cultivating. But now you're an adult, with a discerning mind. And like, can you not logically see that if you can change your thoughts from apple pie to, oh my God, car accident, watching the news, to, oh, look at that funny show, that your brain can't go in different places, and that if you listen to how you feel viscerally, then that'll inform you. Like if you're sitting and think and you feel awful, then when you have a happy thought, listen to your body. So in the meditation, I add this, right? So feel your body as you're thinking about that hard time in your 20s. Watch your breath, the tension in your muscles. Now, when you think of the giggliest time when you went out with the girls or whatever you did, or the boys, now feel your body. How's it breathing? How's the tension? How's the organs tend to be drumming up in there? And then they start to connect with, oh God, maybe my digestive issues, maybe my back pain, maybe everything is heightened every time I'm hanging on to this negative talk in my head. And that helps maybe motivate them, right? Because you need a motivation factor in there. What's the reward? You'll feel better. Not just, everything snowballs. Everything is, I have a diagram of a fish water tank with balls in there with your emotions, your mind, your muscles, your nociceptors, your deep visceral organs. They're all connected. One ball moves, everything, all the juices in our body move, everything's affected. So start somewhere. If you can't change your mind, start with breath. If you can't change your pain, start with thoughts and breath again, and keep going. Don't stop.
Find the door in. That's why I created this new mobile app that's coming out based on the Punas. It's coming out May 2nd, 2022. And the tagline for the app is embodied mental health care. It's exactly what you're talking about. But this is not just, I'm going to change my thoughts. It's, well, how could I work with my breath? Or could this meditation help? Or could this music playlist help? Or could this movement help? Like there's
a good cry.
Call a friend. There's so many doors in to experiencing our suffering, but then also transforming it and making choices to not suffer 100% of the time forever.
And be kind with yourself, that at first it's like any pattern you're trying to change, whether it's trying to sit up straight, it's going to be hard at first. And then but when you keep practicing, it only gets easier. I say, if you decide you're going to walk, you don't start with 10 kilometers. You'll start with one, and you might come back and, oh my God, if you haven't walked in a long time, my legs are burning. But after a week, you think, oh, maybe I can do 2 kilometers. The burn has gone down after the week. Now you do 2, and that's where the burn is. Everything that we want to, every pattern we want to change needs to be done with practice. There's a story, yogic story, of this poor man's in a hut, and a wise man comes to him. I may have the story not completely correct, by the way, but the moral is the same.
Go for it.
And the
details don't matter.
It's the feeling, right? Again, the point of the subject of the day. He says there's a fortune underneath your hut, 12 feet down. You have to dig for it, though. Not 1 foot, not 2 feet, not 3 feet, not 4 feet, not 11 feet, 11 inches. You just got to keep going till you get to that gold. You got to do the work. And you can't just do 1 foot and say, well, that didn't work. No, because you haven't gone deep enough. And trust it, the process, that at some point, if you keep practicing, it will become your new habit. Not overnight. It can take months, maybe a few years. But is it not worth it? Do you not want that feeling of, I can handle a storm, whatever the storm is? I can start to see it as just a storm. Life is just full of storms, sunshine, then storm, sunshine, then storm. And they really hold space for both of them. But know when you're in, the storm, sunshine will come. It's always above that storm anyway.
I agree, Helene. And, there's a part of me that thinks all of us little tiny yoga therapy schools, like you and I and Inner Peace and some of the others, like we have so much connection with our students that we can take them through this journey, not in an intellectual way where you're sitting and listening to lectures, but what you and I are talking about, this is our superpower for our small yoga therapy school. And I think this is precious. Some people want the certificate from, XYZ place, but I think to get 3 years of this training that you're offering and I'm offering and some others, like this is it. And then once you experience being held and going through those waves and back and forth, of course you feel comfortable being able to do that for another human.
Because you have a lived experience of how yoga changed you. So what I say to every student is it'll be a small group because I want to see everybody on Zoom, and I can't handle too many because then I can't give enough. Like I've never had big parties. I like one-on-one. I don't know how many people are watching, and I don't want to know right now. I'm talking to Amy and we're sharing, and this becomes, an authentic sharing to me, and that feels great. But the bottom line is, that if you've experienced the shift. So I tell everyone, two things. One, I'll be there forever because we now have a relationship. And two, that I don't ever say the word promise lightly. I have 4 children. You don't use that word lightly when you have a parent. you learn quickly. But I do promise, if you do the work, if you study, if you stick with these 3 years, that's a time for patterns to change. 3 years. That's pretty good timing. That I promise you will have a personal journey. No matter what you do or don't do, some people don't go on and use it. Doesn't matter. That you will have a personal journey. And a lot of people, I believe, actually come here first and foremost for that, whether they know it or not.
Exactly.
And if they don't have that personal journey, which I can't believe is not, and all the people, it's never happened. It doesn't have to be huge metamorphosis, but something shifted where, the perspective of how to look at life shifts. Then they can't, then it's harder for them, but it'll happen. And once they have it, only then can you teach it. Only then can you see somebody and say, trust me if you do the work. Trust me if you do the work. Because they're looking at you thinking, how did you get here? Because I did the work. Yes, some of it I was born in my lone light. Yes, it was cultivated by my dad, and in a way by watching my mother and thinking I'm choosing. That starts to become my discerning mind. I'm choosing to be more this way, lovey-dovey, than this way. My mother had other qualities, she set 3 world records at 19. She was a brilliant woman, had a pharmaceutical degree at Purdue. She had her strengths. She taught me that, when she divorced, my parents divorced, that she can then become a realtor. And she did. So she didn't work except for teaching people to swim, mentally and physically handicapped people to swim, gave her time. And then she divorced in her 40s and thought, she worked for Adidas Canada, and then she would decide to so she taught me you can always do something new. So that gift she gave me. And that was also useful, that you're not stuck. You're not stuck. Being stuck is a mindset. It is not a reality.
Yep. And we know, the latest neuroscience is saying growth mindset. It's not that you didn't achieve it, it's that you didn't achieve it yet. And you're learning.
I love that word yet. When people say, well, I've never been flexible, not yet.
Yeah.
And you don't have to become super flexible. You just want to be less in pain when you move. Yeah. That's what you're coming from. You're not going to go apply for Cirque du Soleil. So let's let that big thing go. Let's just be able to move more fluidly, less painfully, to go through life more fluidly, less painfully, to be able to watch a storm in awe a little bit more.
I saw someone in our program a year ago, they have frozen shoulder and couldn't lift their arm. And last night she put her arms overhead with her palms together over the head. And she had the biggest beaming smile, that, wow, I'm in my 60s and I can move my arm again. And it is so fantastic. It's not Cirque du Soleil, right?
Right. I just turned 60 last Friday, by the way. So that resonates.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, I feel fabulous. And again, back to mindset, like, this is 60. I'm like, I can do it. I have a joke that I say to my kids, around 8:00 at night, I feel 60. I'm on my bed. Otherwise, I feel amazing. But, Ray Long used to come to my center to do workshops. I haven't seen him in years. He was at the first MISTY, and he's an orthopedic surgeon. And if you are under anesthesia, your arm can do the movements.
Isn't that crazy?
I share that with you.
Yeah. I mean,
this is getting
that just is mind blowing.
Yeah. The mind, and to be very careful, honor to Neil, who once said, we have to be careful to make sure they know, not once, many times, and I teach it many times. It's not that you're imagining it. It's very real pain. Yeah. But where the pain comes from is not solely the tissue. That has all the layers have to do with it as well. And so once they open up to think, oh, it's not, and Neil has been such a great influence he's my pain mentor, and honor him. Somatic staff, and I want to have calls out, and Shelley, there's and you, and so many Misty people, there's too many, but all my Misty peeps, I love you all. But it's that helping them understand that there's more to physical than just the physical. And and then if they come emotionally, that where is it in the body? And let's try to move that in the body. I know you're suffering emotionally, but that's being held in your body. What hurts you in your body? Let's see if we can work throughout. Then check in, and how do you feel emotionally now? Sometimes it's like you say, it's what door you get into. But first and foremost, they need to feel safe with me. And that comes from the relationship. That comes from trying to be as open and warm in my personal way, and whoever's out there in your own authentic way. Every human being, people love you. Somebody loves you on this planet. And so you are lovable.
Well, and maybe the first step is to realize that. Maybe that's your first year of yoga therapy training, is to realize I actually am lovable and I didn't even know it.
Mm-hmm. And you all have somebody, at least one person on this planet that you can relate to, and that cares about you. And so that means you're lovable.
Or an animal. It maybe isn't a person,
or
maybe it's an animal.
Yeah, that comes and soothes you. And to an animal or to another human being, at least one other human being on this planet, you are capable of, when they're sad, holding them.
Yeah.
And so do that for yourself. When you feel insecure and sad, imagine it's your friend, because if you're not your own best friend, then treat yourself like that. And if you can hold somebody, then you can hold anybody.
Right. Well, I think that's a lovely note to end on, but I want you to just take a few minutes and tell us what you have coming up personally, if there's a Misty this year, how we can be in contact with you.
Yeah. So this is the second year of delayed Misty. I've talked about it with a few of my peeps. Yeah. Staffen defies me, or didn't defend, whatever the word is. I have a little dyslexia. That's not my strength words. It says you can't do Misty unless we can be in person. And it has to be without masks. And so I'd rather wait, because if I can't hug everybody, if everybody can't sit in this one room and eat together, or be 40 people in a room, because it's, and just be free, I don't know that I want to do it. And I don't think it's going to be the Misty. So I'll wait, and I'm hoping then it'll be next March. It was supposed to be last March, and it was supposed to be this March, but it's not clear enough now. So I just know that this COVID storm will end and Misty will return. They can find me. Misty is actually, you can Google Misty or Yoga Therapy Montreal. If you Google just Misty, it's hard to find me. Home, which is H for Helene, or Health, Healing, and Happiness, H-O-M, or just H-O-M. Om should be easy enough. So it's pronounced home. HOM Yoga Events is Misty, and HOM Yoga Center is my school, my weekly classes, my teacher training, and finding me for one-on-one sessions. Right now, everything's online, so I'm accessible that way. I just started a new cohort. There is a room for a couple more. So if anybody sees it, and I've actually been recording the first few, because inevitably somebody wants to join in when it started. So it's not too late. I don't know what I've missed, but please I'm on Facebook. I'll answer anybody anytime.
So tell us again, what exactly is your web address? And then what is your name on Facebook, and how do you spell it?
Okay. So Helene is spelled like Helen with an E at the end, Helene. Couvrette, Couvrette. So Helene Couvrette, I don't think there's another one out there.
You're an original.
Yep. So that should be easy to find. And Misty is homyogaevents.com. And my yoga center classes, training, and privates is HOM Yoga Center, spelled ER.com.
Center.
ER. So it's either HOM Yoga Center or HOM Yoga Events, which is Misty. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Helene. I feel like this has been a really touching conversation to hear how you've suffered. And, that's not even half the stories of your life. I've heard the other half too. it just goes on and on and on. How you have stayed positive and friendly and made that choice in spite of all of what's gone on in your life, it actually is a miracle. I really
It's been a
honor
rough
you.
ride. Yeah, it for those who know me more, those are just the highlights of my move. It's been a lot. It hasn't been easy, and thank you for that. I think that even on your, it is still possible, and it's my choice to continue shining. I'm making a choice now, by the way, not to be a grumpy old lady. And that's a choice I'm making now. And so I keep telling myself, don't be a grumpy old lady. Because I am watching some people, struggle with aging and not getting grumpy. And
That's my new mantra.
turning
Amy,
60,
don't be a grumpy old lady. I need to like repeat that maybe like 100,000 times a day or something.
that's the only way you're going to not be a grumpy old lady. You have to repeat it.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Also, because I get a chance to see you and to talk to you. So
I know.
selfishly, I just wanted to connect with the peep out there. And for everybody who knows me personally, I just want to give you all a hug because I miss you all. And I can't wait to hug you all, hopefully sometime soon.
I want to thank Helene for this wonderful time that we spent together and bringing up these really important issues about how do we navigate through these difficult times in life? How do we change our mindset? How do we rebuild neural pathways with every single choice from every single day? How do we not give up hope? How do we sit with the grief and yet know that a new dawn will come? I think this is the essence of yoga therapy, working one-on-one, working with groups, working with yoga therapy trainings, going to the MISTY conference. It's the essence. It's what we're here to do. And it's what is really special about yoga therapy. Sometimes I say the superpower of a yoga therapist is to balance the autonomic nervous system. But I would also say this is a superpower. How can we hold the grief and the joy all at the same time and let them exist and not get too stuck or prefer one or the other? So I really appreciate this conversation that Helene and I had this morning. And I know that these conversations stick with me for a few days. So when I go hiking or when I'm doing my practice, things that were said, stories that were told come up, they bubble up, and I kind of process them and work with them. And I hope you do too. I hope that this podcast kind of takes you into your week and kind of sets the tone and reminds you why you're here and what you're here to do and how you can be of service and how you can tap back into that authenticity and how you can hold your grief and also know that this is not forever, that a new day will come and that grief will be integrated into your being. And there will be joyful times again. I hope this podcast helps you to move in that direction. I also want to just remind you that on May 2nd, 2022, Optimal State has a mobile app coming out that will help you do just that. It is going to be available for iPhone and Android. We're simultaneously building both platforms. And this app is one of the first ones that I've ever seen that has assessment based on the gunas, Rajas, Tamas, Sattva, or you might say, if it's in the body, Vata, Pitta, Kapha. And then it gives you suggestions on how to reprogram your mental state, your physical state, your neural pathways. We have a tracking system to see what your patterns are, morning, noon, and night. Your patterns, how do you tend to get out of balance seasonally or even throughout the different life stages? And then giving you all sorts of ideas from yoga postures to physical exercise to getting out in nature to what should you eat, what should you not eat and drink, all sorts of interventions to keep reprogramming towards that more balanced state. So we are just entering beta testing and it is looking so beautiful. I'm so happy about it. There will be a free version. We want to be inclusive and make sure everyone can participate. But there will also be a tiered version where if you want more options and more interventions and more ways to track, you can, pay a small fee per month to do that. So keep an eye out for that with Optimal State on our Facebook page, on our Twitter. I'd love to have you join us on Twitter. I'm now on TikTok with Optimal State, and of course, Instagram. All of those platforms will be telling you how to download that app in just about 90 days. So very excited to share that with you, especially with regard to our topic today. All right, have a great week, and we'll see you soon. We appreciate that you are a loyal listener to the Yoga Therapy Hour podcast. We'd like to give you a gift each week of an infographic. All you have to do is sign up in the show notes below, and it will be sent to you each week. Thank you for listening. We really appreciate you. Thank you for listening to our show today. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share the episode with a friend or colleague. We're so grateful you're willing to share. Also, you could write us a review on most major platforms that host podcasts. Give us 5 stars if you appreciate the show and tell us what you love so that we can do more of that. Finally, we support several nonprofit organizations through this podcast. See the show notes to understand how you can help. If you'd like to be a guest or a sponsor for this program, contact us at the email welcome@theoptimalstate.com. welcome@theoptimalstate.com. And finally, a special thank you to our team here at Optimal State. We are truly a global family. George Mantuan, one of our executive producers. Adam Satchel, senior media producer and sound engineer from the Philippines. Krishna Panchal, a producer from Canada. Modupe Abdullahi, who does the show notes and is an editor for us from Nigeria. And Peter Morley, who wrote and produced the music for this show, who lives in Australia. Find more about Peter's work at www.zenmusic.biz. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.